Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am so thrilled to be your guide for today's explainer. My name is Divya Saini, and if you're a CBSE Class 10 student, well, you are exactly where you need to be. We're diving deep into Chapter 1, Topic 3 of your NCERT history book, The Age of Revolutions from 1830 to 1848. Let me tell you, understanding this specific era is an absolute goldmine for scoring high marks in your board exams. So grab your notebooks, get focused, and let's make this history completely unforgettable. So how did the Age of Revolutions reshape Europe? This is a classic high-weightage board question, and I want you to just keep it simmering in the back of your mind as we go through the material today. Everything we're about to discuss is a crucial piece of the puzzle to answering that question perfectly. We aren't just memorizing dry dates today, oh no. We are uncovering the dramatic, real-life story of how modern Europe was actually forged. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. Sparks of the 1830 Revolution. 2. Romanticism and national identity. 3. Hunger, hardship, and revolts. 4. 1848. Revolution of liberals. And 5. Outcomes and key takeaways. Okay, let's map this out in our heads to get a strong mental framework before we jump into the details. It is amazing how tightly packed these historical events were. We kick things off with the July Revolution in France in 1830. Then we see the recognition of Greece in 1832. After that, we hit a tragic, boiling point with the Silesian weavers in 1845. And finally, we reach a massive political climax in 1848 with the Frankfurt Parliament. Seeing these chronologically really helps you understand the momentum. Revolution wasn't just some isolated event, you know? It was a rapid domino effect that swept across the entire European continent. Section 1. Sparks of the 1830 Revolution. Right, so as conservative regimes desperately tried to tighten their grip on power after 1815, liberalism and nationalism started to mean just one thing: revolution. And these early movements, they were led by liberal nationalists belonging to the educated commercial middle-class elite. We're talking professors, school teachers, and clerks. The very first major upheaval erupted in France in July 1830. The Bourbon kings were actually overthrown by revolutionaries who installed a constitutional monarchy. This led the Austrian chancellor, Duke Metternich, to famously remark, "When France sneezes, the rest of Europe catches cold." Seriously, mark this down in your notes. This is a super frequent one-mark exam question. What Metternich meant was that revolution was a highly contagious disease. And honestly, he was right. This July Revolution immediately sparked an uprising in Brussels that actually led to Belgium breaking away from the United Kingdom of the Netherlands. Another massive event that really mobilized nationalist feelings across that educated elite was the Greek War of Independence. Greece had been part of the Ottoman Empire all the way since the 15th century, but their struggle for independence ignited in 1821. Nationalists got a ton of support from Greeks living in exile, as well as Western Europeans who absolutely idolized ancient Greek culture. Even the famous English poet Lord Byron organized funds and went off to fight, though tragically he died of a fever in 1824 before he even saw combat. But finally, here is your ultimate takeaway. The 1832 Treaty of Constantinople officially recognized Greece as an independent nation. Don't forget that treaty. Section 2. Romanticism and national identity. Now, the development of nationalism didn't just come from wars and treaties. Culture played a huge, massive role. It served as the emotional fuel that truly united people. If you ever get an exam question asking, how did culture create the idea of a nation, you need to pay close attention to this crucial NCERT vocabulary term right here: Romanticism. Romantic artists and poets explicitly criticized the glorification of reason and science. Instead, what did they focus on? Emotions, intuition, and mystical feelings. Their entire goal was to create a sense of a shared collective heritage, a common cultural past, as the very foundation of a nation. Think about the French painter Eugene Delacroix and his famous piece, The Massacre at Chios. He didn't just paint a sterile, boring historical record. No, he used vivid, striking colors and deeply dramatized the suffering of women and children. Why do that? To appeal directly to the emotions of the viewer and create intense, immediate sympathy for the Greeks against the Turks. This is Romanticism in action, guys, using art as a powerful political weapon. Okay, here is another vital term you need for full marks: Das Volk, which simply means the common people. The German philosopher Johann Gottfried Herder claimed that true German culture wasn't found hidden away in elite, wealthy palaces, but right out there among the common folk. It was through folk songs, folk poetry, and folk dances that the true spirit of the nation was popularized. Culture literally gave the nation its voice. Section 3. Hunger, Hardship, and Revolt. So, while culture was busy shaping minds, harsh realities were actively breaking backs. The 1830s provided the socio-economic kindling that created widespread, terrible desperation among the European masses. Students, please pay close attention to this next point. Understanding the economic hardships of the 1830s provides you with the perfect framework for a really solid 3-mark or 5-mark exam answer. During this time, Europe saw an enormous population boom that meant way more job seekers than actual jobs. Rural populations migrated into overcrowded, miserable city slums. On top of that, small producers were just crushed by stiff competition from cheap, machine-made textile imports pouring in from England. Add to that the fact that peasants were drowning under the burden of feudal dues, and bad harvests caused widespread pauperism. People were literally starving in the streets. And all this misery, it wasn't silent. In 1845, the Silesian weavers' revolt erupted. Here's how it happened step by step. Contractors had been supplying raw materials to weavers, but suddenly they drastically reduced their payments. Completely desperate, the weavers marched right up to the contractors' mansions, demanding higher wages. Well, they were treated with total scorn, which led the crowd to smash windows and loot cloth. The terrified contractors actually fled to a neighboring village, but they returned just 24 hours later, and this time they brought the military. In the tragic, violent clash that followed, 11 weavers were shot dead. It really shows you the raw, heartbreaking desperation of the working class at that specific moment in time. Section 4. 1848. Revolution of Liberals. All of this intense hardship and political frustration finally exploded into a roaring bonfire in 1848. What's absolutely fascinating here is the sheer chaos of the popular unrest. Food shortages and massive unemployment brought the population of Paris right out onto the roads. They erected barricades and literally forced the king to flee. But in places like Germany, Italy, and Poland, the educated middle-class liberals saw an opportunity. They essentially rode the massive wave of peasant anger to push forward their own demands for constitutional nation-states. The most famous example of this middle-class push happened in Germany. On May 18, 1848, exactly 831 elected representatives marched festively to the Church of St. Paul to convene the Frankfurt Parliament. What was their main goal? To draft a constitution for a unified German nation headed by a monarchy, but a monarchy that was subject to a parliament. Sounded like a great plan, right? Well, when they offered the crown on these terms to Friedrich Wilhelm IV, the King of Prussia, he flat out rejected it. Instead, he joined other monarchs to oppose the elected assembly. Over time, the parliament lost its broader support base, and ultimately, troops were called in and forced the assembly to disband. Now, we absolutely must talk about a deeply controversial issue within this liberal movement: the role of women. The reality here is a very powerful and pretty frustrating contrast. Women took highly active political roles throughout this era. They formed their own political associations, they founded newspapers, and they bravely joined public demonstrations. Yet despite all of that, they were completely denied suffrage. That means they were denied the right to vote. When that famous Frankfurt Parliament convened at St. Paul, women were only admitted as silent observers up in the visitors' gallery. It's a very crucial nuance to remember for your exams because it clearly shows the limits and blind spots of 19th century liberalism. And finally, Section 5, Outcomes and Key Takeaways. We've covered a lot of ground today: the sparks, the romantic culture, the brutal economic hardships, and the massive 1848 revolutions. So, what is the ultimate conclusion? The crucial point is this: conservative forces, utilizing the military, did ultimately suppress the liberal movements in 1848. The liberals didn't get their constitutions or freedoms right away. However, and this is a big however, the conservative monarchs realized that they couldn't just magically restore the old order and expect lasting peace. To end the constant cycle of revolution, they knew they had to grant major concessions. Because of these revolts, serfdom and bonded labor were permanently abolished, both in the Habsburg dominions and in Russia. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If the 1848 liberal revolutions failed to achieve all their goals immediately, Why are they still considered a major turning point in modern European history? I really want you to think critically about this as you prepare for your board exams, because the truth is, the seeds of modern democratic nation states were planted right here. They were watered by both culture and conflict, and after 1848, Europe would truly never look the same again. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep studying hard, trust your preparation, and I will see you next time.